Paolo, I want to start with you because it raises the question to me about the difference between USAT and USDT. Is the launch of USAT basically saying that USDT is not compliant under the Genius Act?
Absolutely not. So we have expressly said a few times now that also USDT will be compliant with the Genius Act under the Foreign Issuer Protocol. And there is a pathway in the Genius Act to make it happen, and that's what Tether is focusing on. But at the same time, we felt the need to create a domestic stablecoin in the United States that is focusing on the actual needs of the US market. It is a very efficient market compared to all the emerging markets in developing countries where USDT is leading the way into financial inclusion and growth and banking the unbanked or the underbanked. But while in the United States, the landscape is different. There are many competitors in the financial and fintech sector. So USAT is going to be specifically designed for the growth of the United States and within the United States.
So, Bo, let me ask you then, who exactly is USAT targeting? What kind of customers are you going after with this particular stablecoin, and why would they need it? What's the pitch?
Well, look, our payment rails in the United States have been archaic for quite some time. I liken it to technology development, the way that we communicate, the ways in which we move money has really remained stagnant. And so obviously with Genius passing into law and the adoption of stablecoins, I think this revolutionizes our financial system and truly a way that we've never seen before. It makes payments more cost effective, gives us instant settlement times. It allows us to move money overseas in a much more expeditious way. So, we're looking at a completely new world. I think the customers that we're looking to serve are both global financial institutions that obviously have deep ties to U.S. capital markets, along with consumers that have been underbanked or underserved for quite some time and don't want to pay, insane amounts for transaction fees when they're just moving money to friends and family.
So, Paolo, how do you effectively outcompete USDC here from Circle? How is your strategy different from theirs? Because if we think about these, you essentially have to convince us that these aren't commodities. And I don't mean commodities in the way that they're classified by regulators. I mean commodities in the way that they're not necessarily different from one another.
Well, that's a very good point. But I think the only thing that matters, the most important strategy here to compete is distribution. Tether built over the last 11 years now the biggest distribution network, physical and digital, probably in the history of humanity. I'm not saying that lightly. So we have hundreds of thousands of physical distribution places in all the emerging market developing countries. We have partnered with Rumble and invested in Rumble as a huge distribution channel within the United States with like 60 million active users per month. Our ability, and we have partnered, we have invested. So we don't have, like our competitors, to rent out the distribution channels. We own them, we partner with them, and so we can leverage to maximize the profitability, but also reinvest in our own ecosystem to make it wider, to make it more efficient and cost-effective for every single user.
Bo, one thing that's really interesting, I think, that's happened over the last few months is the idea that stablecoins is no longer just the purview of companies that focus on digital assets. And indeed, there's reporting that indicates companies such as retailers or even payments firms are interested in adopting this technology. Can you share with us any conversations that you've had with executives at other companies that are interested in this digital asset?
Well, you're seeing this with the larger banks in the United States as well. People are talking about issuing their own stablecoin. I think they're going to pivot. I think that many of these firms are just a little bit out over their skis in terms of understanding the technological needs that must be there in order for the infrastructure to work properly. And that's something that we have at Tether. We have the best technology. We have the distribution channels, as Paolo has described. I think that we'll have many partners in this space. We'll collaborate with many of the traditional financial institutions in the United States to build out the best product for their consumers. I think that we will be adopted far and wide here in the U.S., both from the consumer perspective as well as the institutional perspective. And I think that we'll set up these corridors to move money in ways that people have never seen before.
You mentioned
it should be the most.
You mentioned financial institutions. Let's make news here. Are you speaking to any of them right now? Have you spoken to any of them?
Well, look, we're talking to several of them. We'll have fantastic news to release in the coming months. I think we'll have many partners, not just one. We're not going to be exclusive. Look, we're agnostic. We want to help as many consumers as possible in the U.S., and we want to help as many businesses that we can as well.
All right, so that means you're coming back on to tell us when you do have news to announce, Bo. You just committed yourself to that. Paolo, talk a little bit about how USAT, the U.S. regulated stablecoin that you're launching here, will differ when it comes to what it's backed by. We know that USDT is backed by short-term U.S. Treasuries, along with some other cash equivalents. What is USAT going to be backed by?
So USAT will be backed by U.S. Treasuries, again, short-term. I think that is in the biggest interest of the United States and also U.S. companies, but also Tether as a broader company to showcase strong alliance with the United States. We have, with USDT specifically, we have helped the US dollar hegemony as no other product in the world. And so we plan to continue to do the same with the USAT. And so we want to make sure that every single USAT user knows that there is a strong backing, liquid backing, and at any point in time they can redeem USAT for $1 and use it in a very seamless way throughout all their digital life and physical life.
And Bo, this is all part of a larger plan to grow dramatically over the next 1 to 2 years. You've been very vocal in saying that you want to dominate. Do you have any specific growth targets that you could share with us?
Well, look, I mean, we want to be the largest player in the U.S. market. We already are abroad. We want to match that here. And, I've said this repeatedly over the course of the last few months in my former role at the White House. I firmly believe that as tokenization occurs, so will capital flow into stablecoins. We want to have seamless on and off ramps to our U.S. capital markets. If we have tokenization of public securities, people are going to be using stables to go in and out of those different asset classes. And we want to be the best stable in the marketplace to do so. I think we'll have many fantastic partners, whether it be institutional banking firms, whether it be market makers, et cetera. And so, we're talking to a plethora of different folks about how these technologies can plug into their current ecosystems. I think they'll adopt them very quickly, and we'll be able to set up a new payment rail system in the U.S. that benefits the U.S. consumer in a tremendous way.
Bo, can you answer a question that I'm sure a lot of people have who saw your work in the White House, who saw your work for the Trump administration? After all, you helped shepherd the Genius Act, and then you joined this company. How can you ensure viewers, listeners, competitors, that there is no conflict of interest between you and what is happening right now at the White House?
Well, look, I've stepped down from my roles touching anything related to crypto in the White House. And, I felt like this was a fantastic opportunity to jump into the private sector and do exactly what the Genius Act intended to do, which was onshore the best developers in the space, onshore the brightest minds in crypto, and make the U.S. the crypto capital of the world. Tether is by far and away the most important private-public partnership the U.S. government has. We're buying more treasuries than anyone else in the private sector. It makes us less reliant on foreign adversaries in order to purchase our debt. But also, you can't be the crypto capital of the world without having the most important company in the space here on U.S. soil. And so that's what I've had an opportunity to do, and I'm extremely excited about it.
Can you talk to us a little bit about how this role came together and when you started conversations with Paolo or the other folks over at Tether?
Well, look, I had been in conversations with everyone in the industry over the course of the last 8 months as we worked diligently on Genius to make sure it was the best product for the American people. And, I took my job very seriously in that way. We wanted diversity of thought. We wanted to hear from the entire ecosystem before we developed a product that would upend the financial system in a positive way. And that's what we've done. And so, when I announced that I was resigning, I had, received countless offers from different firms. And again, I'll point back to my prior comment. When I was looking at different opportunities, I said, well, hey, look, I have an opportunity now to do something that, I described as being extremely important when I was in my role, and that was onshore the most important players in the space. And that's what we're doing here with USAT. They're going to have a U.S. entity based in Charlotte, North Carolina, which is where I'm from, which certainly made it attractive. And then we also have a U.S. product that I think which will be by far and away the premier product in the stablecoin market here on U.S. soil.
We don't have a ton of time. I want to jump in, and then I know Scarlett has some more questions. Were you talking about this role while you were still employed at the White House?
No, I was not.
Okay.
I was actually engaging with several different folks, just focused on the digital assets working group report at that time. And then obviously we got into August, resigned from my role. I had several interviews in which I said I was being courted by several different firms and receiving many different offers. I went through those offers and talked about those with my family, and then decided this was the best place for me to go and build.
Okay, thank you for answering that, Bo. Paolo, let me ask you a final question. You have repeatedly said that Tether is not interested in going public. We started the show by talking about a couple of crypto companies that have gone public and are doing well. Bo's plans to dominate means there's going to be a lot of need for money. What might change your mind on going public?
Well, I think that the beauty of Tether is that it has three features that most of the company don't have. So companies should have, in general, a good ethos and good philosophy. They should have the ability to innovate, in our case, innovate in tech and finance, and also should have the capital. Most of the companies in the world, if not all the companies in the world, have either a good philosophy or have good tech innovation ability, or both of them, but they lack capital. Tether last year made $13.7 billion in profit, not revenues, profits. And this year, I would be surprised if we don't top that. And so that is exactly, even if you look at our competitors, that is exactly what differentiates us. We have the entire ground base covered with also our ability to generate enormous amount of capital and then profits and reinvest them in infrastructure and expansion and distribution. In the last 3 years, Tether invested almost $5 billion in the U.S. market alone, and a lot also if we think about the global markets. We invest in different technologies, of course, in different sectors, but most importantly, we invest in our distribution channels. The investment in Rumble is one, but we invest in chains of bodegas in Central South America. We invest in companies that are building hundreds, thousands kiosks in the next 5 years in Africa to build, again, even there in the most difficult market in the world, the biggest distribution network, a physical distribution network for the emerging markets. So that is what we are set to do, and we have all the capital to do so. So we can remain independent. I don't want to spend the next 30 months and every single quarter of my life to trying to explain to analysts why we are not optimizing to make 2 cents more rather than focusing on making good in the world.